It's starting pitcher week here at Beat the Shift, and we've got none other than Nick Pollack of Pitcher List to talk through it all. We'll have the ATC undervalued starting pitchers in part 2 later this week, but for now, in part 1, we've got a ton of strategy questions. What to do with Dodgers pitchers? Which is more important in today's game, ratios or strikeouts? What to look for in spring training, and more. Part 1 of our starting pitcher preview coming up next here on Beat the Shift. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always is Ruvain Guy. What's going on, Ruvain?
I'm doing well today. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Well, we've got an exciting announcement. The FSWA has nominated the Beat the Shift podcast for Best Baseball Podcast of the year 2024. Congratulations on the nomination, Ruvain.
Same to you. A lot of hard work on both our sides, and I think our guest tonight has something in common with us with that also.
Yes, and we booked this guest before the awards nominations were announced. So, we just get on good people here. Let's bring him on right away. It's Nick Pollack of Pitcher List, and congrats to you, Nick, on another nomination for Podcast of the Year. I think this is the third in that category, right? Or more, actually.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. And we cheat because it's a network, really. Like, we have all these different shows on the Pitcher List podcast network, but that gets nominated. I don't know which one it is specifically, but you guys, before the show, I was saying, hey, congrats, guys. What's this, it's like the third, fourth time you've been nominated for this? And apparently this is the first time the Beat the Shift has been nominated for an FSWA award, which is ridiculous. And congratulations, guys, for the nomination. It's so very well deserved. I'm rooting for you. You guys put a lot of work into this, and you have, I think, a very unique podcast with that's not necessarily the same old kind of stuff. So good luck. I'll be rooting for you guys.
Thank you. And yeah, that's what we try to do. You listen to the show every week here, for those of you who do, and we do something different. It's not it's more strategy focused and more about risk and more about getting you to think about things. My goal is to get everybody to noodle, and where, you're not saying, Ariel, who do you like better, this guy. No. Think of the principles that we're teaching here and noodle on the answer. So there you go.
And Nick, we're gonna be rooting for you, and we're gonna be rooting for the other candidates, other nominations in this category as well. It's not just us.
Yeah, we shouldn't win. I don't want us to win. We did good. We're fine. We're great. Go get that plaque.
Well, I'll be happy for any of us to win. I think all the shows that were nominated were excellent. I think there was another show, Sports Ethos podcast, that I actually just appeared on the other day, and I just appeared on the RotoWire show.
Oh, nice.
I appeared on a bunch of award-nominated shows this week just by randomness. So I guess we know that they're all good there. But no, seriously, congrats on the nomination, and we're lucky to have you here. This is our starting pitcher episode, and there's just not a better person to bring on than Nick. So we'll do a little strategy, and we'll get into ATC's undervalued players, which Nick doesn't always agree with, but that's what we're here for, to really get his take. And I used to be a big pitcher guy, and I don't know, over the years I've gotten better at hitting, and pitching is just so much harder to figure out, and so I'm going to rely on you a lot, Nick. And I
appreciate that so much. I need to have a job, and if you've really figured out projections for pitchers, then I wouldn't be here. So thank you for the struggles. Thank you for the difficulty. And it's so fun talking about pitchers because they're human, and they shift all the time. They have all these factors. Every single pitcher has the same task, yet all of them do it in a different way. And I think that's really, really cool to dissect. So excited to get to dive into all of it with you.
So let's get right into the strategy of it. So let's talk about valuing pitcher changes. We're talking about pitchers who pitch a certain way last year or the year before, and a little bit different this year. How do you value a pitcher, Nick, that is working on a new pitch? Like you hear in the offseason, oh, he's working on this cutter, he's working on this. Does that add value to you? How do you evaluate that?
Well, I mean, I'm working on my novel, Ariel, okay? And I don't know if it's going to be published this year, next year, ever. Guys are working on things all the time. And it's really hard to discern, okay, this is actually something that is going to affect how they play out this year. We've certainly seen it. I remember Freddie Peralta introducing a slider, and I had major criticisms against this, saying, look, you can't even locate his four-seamer. How can we expect him to command a new pitch, the slider? And that really changed him into the guy that we know now. The main thing that I focus on when it comes to new pitches is, does it make sense? And this was something about, I want to say, like last year, where we're hearing about, say, Dylan Cease throwing a sweeper or a curveball. And we have Hunter Green throwing a splitter. We have a couple other guys throwing splitters. And in some cases, it made sense. Oh, man, Clark Schmidt's leaning into his cutter more. That was good because he needed a weapon against left-handers. And one of the better weapons for strikes against opposite-handed batters is a cutter that goes in on the hands. That's what Clark Schmidt learned. He's been much better since. Hunter Green, it's kind of interesting. He had this really good season last year, but the splitter was terrible. It didn't get enough strikes. It didn't get whiffs, all this stuff. And what Hunter Green has really needed the most has been a strike-earning pitch, and a splitter is not really that for the most part. Same with Dylan Cease. Dylan Cease against the lefties didn't get enough strikes with a slider. His four-seamer was too hittable, and a sweeper isn't a pitch that normally works against opposite-handed batters, and that didn't really add up to something that was going to be a long-term success. So when you hear about new pitches, you got to really think across the arsenal that they have right now, what are their weaknesses? And in general, does that kind of pitch fit inside of the mold or not? So I don't get hyped about it unless it's something that I think makes sense, like a sinker for an extension guy who doesn't have a good way to attack their same-handed batters, or a changeup against opposite-handed batters. The thing about a changeup, though, I will mention, anytime a guy says he's working on a changeup, when have you ever heard that actually work? Right? Like a guy getting a new changeup and it really panning out. It took Matthew Boyd like 4 or 5 years to finally get his going. But generally, guys who aren't good at changeups stay bad at changeups.
What about changing the grip on the changeup? Because some pitchers
well, that's
do that
a possibility if it's like a split grip or so. Sometimes that really turns into that. The thing is about a changeup is that you're generally throwing a four-seamer or a sinker just with that grip. And if you don't have a good feel for that initially, because every single pitcher has tried to change it before they tell you about it in spring or so, it to me means that they're really bad throwing without their index finger. And if you think about throwing a changeup like a traditional circle change, what you're doing is you're taking your index finger and you're pushing it into your thumb, making that circle like the AOK symbol, and then you're throwing a four-seamer instead of your index and your middle. Now you're throwing with your middle and your ring finger. And either you put it on the four-seamer grip or you put it on the two-seamer grip, whatever you want. And guys sometimes don't have good feels throwing with their ring finger and not their index finger. I was that case. I didn't like it. And I had a couple of teammates as well that just could not find that. And I'm often very shocked when I see a changeup that works out over time. I think really legitimately the only one I can think of is Matthew Boyd, and that took years. So when it comes to new pitches, don't get too hyped unless it's like a slider, and everyone should throw a slider if you're right-handed. But yeah, it's not really something that I put a heavy stock into, especially when it's just whispers right now.
So what about forget about new pitch, but what about changing your pitch mix? So throwing more fastballs, throwing more sliders. What do you value? How do you get to valuing pitchers heading into the new season, where late last year they've got a new pitch mix and maybe it worked or maybe it didn't?
Yeah. Oh man, this is the fun. This is really like what I do. I'm a little different. This is why actually Ariel and I what's fun about this podcast a lot is every year we have different opinions on different guys, because Ariel does the process so well of, look, these are the numbers. This is what we know is stickiest and what isn't from year to year, or emphasizing previous seasons and looking forward with that. And for me, it might surprise everyone, I don't focus on ERA and WHIP and K rate and all that kind of stuff for the most part. I actually just look at the individual pitches and get a sense of seeing the recipe and saying, okay, that works, that doesn't. Kind of like, I'm not a chef, I'm a terrible cook, but like a chef looks at is making a sandwich or a meal.
I went to culinary school for 6 years. I don't know if I.
Is that right?
No,
man.
I'm kidding.
And I'm the chef here.
I'm kidding.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
Oh, I would have believed it, Ariel. Honestly,
He ended
I
up
really would have.
poisoning the teachers there. So.
Was it just like hanging out with a grandparent for 6 years or something like that? I mean, that
No,
counts.
I'm just joking around. I do make a very good chicken chow mein, though. That is my
Oh, is
specialty.
that right?
Yes, I do.
That's not at all what I would have expected. Well, I would have maybe guessed 100 dishes before that. That's amazing. But what I'm getting at really is I look at the pitch mix, and every single time in my rank, it's actually got a DM about this today. They're like, I don't know what to make out of your rankings because you talk about all these guys and then you're saying without conviction, like, this is not good and this is a weakness and it could get worse or it could get better. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? And I'm saying, well, yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm identifying something that's a problem for him. It could get better. These are solutions for it. He might not find that solution because these are humans and it's absolutely difficult to be a prophet, right? That's kind of what I do is I try and showcase all of the strengths and weaknesses. A good example would be a guy like Hunter Brown who doesn't have a dominant pitch. I want to say it's the fastball four-seamer, which has a good whiff rate against right-handers, but it is a dead zone movement pitch, and he pairs it with a sinker that's also dead zone movement, and he locates that decently well, but he doesn't have this secondary pitch that's a big whiff pitch. He moved away from the slider to go more with the cutter. I hope he does more of that this year. And I feel like that is more of a stabilizer as a secondary because the slider wasn't effective and the curveball is inconsistent. And that cutter, look, it's getting really good results when he throws it and he locates it in a good spot. And I encourage that pitch mix change because, yes, this is making him better. This is a overall more effective addition to his arsenal. So those are the kind of things that, you can look at and you can just say, is he, Alex Chamberlain in First Pitch Arizona, this is the perfect example, did a whole presentation about pitch mix and looked at Frankie Montas moving away from a sinker to a splitter and pretty much just usage changed from 25% both ways. And what do you know? He has more whiffs now because, splitters get more whiffs than sinkers. So, yes, his strikeout rate went up, right? We can just discern those things quickly based on the pitch mix changes. And I thought that was such an insightful, quick, easy, simple way to explain this. Of what does a pitch mix change mean? And it's this one gets whiffs, this one gets strikes, but no whiffs. This one is just bad. You can pretty much say, okay, cool, go get rid of that. What we generally see works is this thing. So that's what you have to do. And they're evolving all season long. I write about it every night for my SP Roundup at Pitcher List because I just want to say, oh man, this pitch is showing up. That's cool. Like Bryce Miller one day, he just felt his curve and it looks really good. And oh man, maybe this is the new secondary that it needs. And it's gone in the next start. Okay, never mind. That's not going to be the thing.
What about arm angle and arm slot? Because we saw, during the playoffs, they kept mentioning that Sean Manaea saw Chris Sale and his angle and how he was throwing it, and he just changed it like that on the fly, and his results were great. If he keeps that arm angle in that slot, he should hypothetically have the same results.
Yeah.
Correct?
So that's a fun one. This is what I say in my rankings, maybe. What happens a lot is pitchers are creatures of habit, right? You throw something, you feel good about it, you do it again. Think about yourselves playing pool, for example, right? You get into that groove, in that moment, man, I can hit every shot. I know all the angles. I've got this natural feel. I'm hitting every single shot. And you come back in a week, 2 weeks, and it's not the same, right? That's the same thing with pitching. You see guys get into these rhythms where they have such good feel, they're locked in, and then it gets disrupted, and then it's just not the same. Sean Manaea has had really good runs in the past. This isn't like the first ever moment that Sean Manaea has been an effective pitcher, being able to locate his sinker and then being able to put his sweeper and changeup underneath that, right? In fact, actually, his sinker got destroyed by left-handers even during that run, and he got really fortunate with the results. The ICR, that is ideal contact rate, and ideal contact is essentially it's barrels, but also solid contact and also flares and burners. These are the ones that result in high WOBAs. So that's the ideal contact for a hitter. It's better than just barrels or hard hit percentage. And yeah, this sinker got crushed, but results were fine, so that was good. I imagine he won't get lucky in that sense. And Sean Manaea being that lower arm angled guy we generally see, feel goes in and out. So you just missed a lot of time over the winter. Is that feel still going to be there? I'm going to say no, but I want to be hopeful that he can get locked in again at the start of the year. So he's a fun pick to take at the end of your drafts and to say, all right, do you have it? No? Cool. I'm going to move on now.
Yeah. So what I'll say is that the reason why I struggle with pitching a little bit more than hitting is, projections are based on the fact that, well, players been doing something a certain way. You learn from history, and every mathematical model says, well, you use history to predict the future. So you don't have that much kind of change in hitting as you do in pitching. Sure, you can have somebody try to steal more bases. Sure, a guy can change his swing, but you don't really see it. Guys don't change all that much. Yeah, you have trends up and down in the strikeout rate, but in pitching, you can have somebody, as you said, a new feel, a new arm slot, a new pitch, and it's a totally different ball game. And that's why I look to some of the softer stuff, and I look at, reading you guys and other people who are commenting on the actual pitch changes for pitchers a little bit more than hitters. For hitters, I'm pretty much using straight projections. For pitchers, I'm using projections, but I'm getting more soft information because there's just so much there. Now, eventually, or I should say pretty soon, I would expect projections to start going down to the detail of by pitch. Like, here's Sean Manaea's number, or any pitcher. Here's this person's number on their fastball. Here's their numbers on their slider. Well, if you're now throwing the slider more and it's a more effective pitch, well, your number is going to increase. I think you're going to see that more incorporated into projections. It's not fully there yet. That would make it better, but I still think there's just so much that the human eye can do in pitching.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just it's the most fun thing about it. There's always more things to dig up about everyone, and it's why it's taking so long for me to put on my top 400, because it's just what I'm doing with everyone, really understanding this blueprint of it and getting all that extra bit of like, okay, cool, this was the result, but is it because his put away rate on his slider all of a sudden was a 35%? And that seems like, what is a good put away rate, Nick? It's usually like 22% is what we see. So when you see a massive one, that just means they got really fortunate executing a pitch in 2 strike counts one year. Thus, his strikeout rate went way up. But that's probably going to come back down, and that means the strikeout rate comes down, right? Like little things like that all of a sudden change a season. And there's so much to uncover with pitchers. So it makes me still have a job.
Yeah. So here's something a little bit more targeted. We've often seen in the past some really good pitcher values come from being relief pitchers and turning into starter. I mean, take like Chris Sale. Chris Sale started as a reliever, but I don't know. I went to a seminar, one of the first Baseball HQ seminars I went to, and they're like, no, this relief pitcher turned starter. This is a guy to watch. And I drafted him, and that really turned great for Chris Sale. You had last year Reynaldo Lopez, get the starting nod, and he turned in a fantastic season. So I'm wondering what you think about that, and take a pitcher like Clay Holmes, and maybe you have another example of another pitcher this year, and thoughts on them for the coming year.
So yeah, right. You mentioned also Spencer Strider there, Ravine.
Strider's another recent one, sure. Yeah,
Christian Javier, another one. It really depends on the pitcher. And I know that's a terrible answer. No one wants to hear that. But it really just depends. I mean, even last year, right? Reynaldo Lopez and Garrett Crochet. Sure. There's also A.J. Puck and D.L. Hall. And I certainly know that.
Jordan Hicks.
It happens. Yeah, Jordan Hicks didn't really work out. Right, exactly. So when it comes to going from relief to starter, there are a couple things you have to wonder about. One, are you going to keep the velocity gains that you got as a reliever? Generally when you're a reliever, you can go max effort and you're going to have a higher velocity. When you're a starter, the whole adage is you're supposed to be at 90%, and that makes you capable of going longer into the game. You're not emptying the tank faster. So generally you don't see the velocity stay up. Grant Holmes actually has kept the velocity up a little bit, and which is very interesting. But I would expect with Clay Holmes going to the Mets, for example, we're going to see a small dip in that velocity. The movement, probably similar, just not at like 96, 97, more like 93, 94. Something like that is generally what you see, two ticks down. Then the other question is, all right, what do they throw? Shocking, right? You can survive with 2 pitches. You absolutely can. We've seen many pitchers do this. Hunter Green has done it. Spencer Strider, Jared Jones for most of the year last year, even though he did throw a changeup kind of. And of course, we have Garrett Crochet last year going away from that slider into a cutter, and now he's even adding a sinker. But there are ways that this can work, but it demands a few things. One, you have to have a dominant four-seamer that gets whiffs. It's just so hard to be a two-pitch pitcher without that. Ben Brown does not. Ben Brown does not have a four-seamer that gets whiffs. He has a really good curveball, but he needs a third pitch because that four-seamer just isn't enough, right? So does Clay Holmes have that? Well, not really. He has a sinker, and that generates outs and grounders, which is actually better suited for a starter than as a reliever, but he needs more stuff there. Well, he does look like he's having a changeup back. He didn't have to use it as a reliever, and maybe that works. He also has two breaking balls that do get whiffs, and it does make sense. I mean, I don't generally think positively or negatively about the shift from reliever to starter. I just say, great, this guy is a starter now. You know, if I just saw him and said, great, hey, there's this random guy, he's a starting pitcher, what do you think? That is how I treat a lot of these relievers. When it comes to workload as well, I don't get concerned about it because to pitch all year as a reliever is just as strenuous on the body than it is starting throughout the full year. If people want to talk about innings, it's just not a comparison, you know? It's really not the same thing as just like if I'm a starter going like 3 innings a game every week or so. Once a game every week. That's totally different. And I'm not concerned about Clay Holmes's innings for the year ahead. I think the Mets are going to put him in the rotation and then just let him go.
That's a big thing.
Go every 5 days.
That's a big thing. The number of innings we'll get. So
right, and I think a lot of people are going to think, well, they're going to have to slow him down. Like, no. As a reliever, you've already. It's an equivalent in my view. You get more rest. You throw more innings, but you get more rest, and it's very strenuous throwing every day.
That's what was so frustrating with the White Sox already. That was so frustrating with the White Sox. With Garrett Crochet, he's piling up all these strikeouts, but they take him out after 3-4 innings, and then his fantasy value is like, I mean, you get those strikeouts,
that was the worst.
You can never get a win out of him.
Yeah, that was.
Well, he was on the White Sox, so you weren't going to get a win out of him anyway.
No. But he's different. When he pitched, he kept them in the game. Even if they weren't scoring a lot of runs, he kept them in the game.
Right. Yeah, at the very least, it could have just given him an opener. Come on, guys. We need a win. Give us a chance for a win. With those 4 innings with Garrett Crochet. Well,
then they have to pay him more. That would be silly for them.
That's why they traded him.
That's exactly right. There you go. But right. So for Clay Holmes, I think of him just as a new pitcher. And really, I won't be able to make a good assessment until I see what he's doing in March. What is he throwing? How is he going to attack lefties? Because a sinker is not good against opposite-handed batters. It is amazing against same-handed batters. Is what I made my college career on. Is just jamming all these right-handers with sinkers inside and getting them grounding out to shortstop in third.
Hey, I jam people with screwballs in softball. That's the idea.
Oh, there you go. Right. Lefties, I would assume. Righties. I would assume. Yeah. But right. So. I'm curious to see how Clay Holmes adapts and does that. The changeup is a good addition. That makes sense. Opposite hand batter. But I mean, that's always what it is. It's never. I often get questions like these of who is the next blank, and the thing is, every pitcher is a different mold. It seems like this year it is who's the next reliever, the next like Crochet or Reynaldo Lopez is the big one.
Well, we've seen a track record of that throughout the years. That those are good, buckets.
Very
to
fair.
To pick.
We've also seen, in the same way we've seen, like who's the next prospect coming up. That's going to be this guy, Paul Skeens or whatever, right? Who's going to be the next Tarek Skubal coming back from Tommy John or something that's going to be, or next Cole Reagans, right?
Well, I'm not naming a pitcher. I'm just saying that it's a skill transfer.
Absolutely. No. Well, you're right. What I'm trying to emphasize for you is you're correct, is that everyone that says that who is the next blank, it's also happened in the past too. It's not like it's a new mold or something that every year that there's this thing. It's just it's an existing blueprint. And everyone's different. Sometimes they fall into that blueprint, sometimes they don't. So
you mentioned spring training, and I'm wondering, what do you look for in spring training? And maybe I'll phrase it this way: is can you give me an example or two of a pitcher that you're unsure about where to draft, that you really are looking to spring training for an idea, what it is, and how you're going to base your decision?
Sure. I mean, the easiest one that I don't think anyone really wants to, already knows about is what I should say, is that, who's going to make the rotation? Like, who is actually surprising us in doing that? Like Luis Heel last year or Jared Jones, right? Those were big guys doing those things. I'm mostly, I want to give a statement about velocity. I track it a lot. I get excited about velocity. I just have a lot of fun with it. And I need to be careful about it because sometimes when I get excited about seeing something, it makes people more in or not. And I'm just saying, look, he's doing it for a moment, and I just want to celebrate in that moment of like, hey, man, good job. You're hitting 96, and you haven't done that before. But that doesn't mean that you are going to have that velocity, right? And when it comes to velocity readings, you have to be wary of 2 words, of sitting and hitting. Hitting is terrible, or touching, really, also. But sitting is amazing. We want sitting. Anytime it says, oh, man, he touched 96. And as Eno put it, well, he's touching 96, but he sat 95. That's not good. Like, yeah, he should be touching 96. He should be touching 97, So if you see touching, hitting, avoid, don't trust any of that. It's all about sitting when it comes to velocity. Young guys are going to have exciting velocities because they are fighting for a position. They are expected to be in camp pretty much at their peak almost and showcase that they deserve this roster spot. They have more energy and excitement for the new year. That's less trustworthy for the full year. While veterans, if you see them sitting there last year's mark, you might actually see a bump because they are generally going to be underneath it. They are saving. These are bullets for the season. And they're kind of going through the motions more than they are trying to impress and earn a roster spot, right? So be wary about that with velocity. Fortunately, we get a decent amount of data. I'd say about half of the parks or so, maybe 40%, have StatCast data. And that means we can track velocity and we can get a sense of a lot of those things. But velocity is a big one, and it's a little weird. K- walk rate is actually really good for the length of spring training. I mean, if you see a guy with a terrible K- walk rate, there might actually be something wrong. If you see an exceptional one, there might be something right. Doesn't mean everything, but it can actually showcase things that we're not able to track or with video. And the last is really just getting a sense of the pitcher more. There are a lot of times we can see new pitches and we can see if they're good or not. We can see if the guy is getting more induced vertical break this year. We can see if he's getting more extension or he's lowered his arm angle, stuff like that. And it's really cool what we're able to see now. Generally, vert numbers, that is IVB numbers, are like slightly elevated out of camp. That's how we saw it last year, at least, and they came down as the season went on. But those are things that are fun to track and you're able to get a sense of. But all in all, I mean, spring training for the most part, you're not really going to get too much out of it. Unless a guy has a new pitch and he's using it a ton, or he's sitting at a velocity that is brand new, then there really isn't a whole lot to talk about with it.
Ruvain, anything to add to spring training?
I actually have one other question for Nick. When you mentioned the sitting and hitting, when a lot of times we hear about the hitting coming from pitchers coming off of injury. Does that make a difference if they're coming off an injury and you hear the term hitting or sitting?
No. I mean, what I would say the most part about hitting is if they've never hit it before. Then that's interesting. But like if they're coming off an injury, I always hate that. They're saying that likely because like they're just looking at the radar gun or something, and they don't have an average, but they just see one and they go, "Oh man, that was 98. He's hitting 98." But they don't have the average, so they can't really say sitting. But yeah, I don't. The hitting, if it's normal, if it's like near his peak of hitting, then I'm really happy. But I want to see sitting a ton, And also you ask like, who am I looking for this year? Ben Brown is one. If he's throwing a cutter, he's going to be fighting for a rotation spot with the Cubs right now with Javier Assad out. Is he throwing a cutter as his third pitch or just something that's a strike pitch in between the curve and the fastball? That would be cool. Obviously, Roki Sasaki. I'm so curious. I have no idea what to do right now with Roki Sasaki. I'm really curious about Lucas Giolito to see where he is and how he's progressing. Is Tyler Glasnow okay? Is he fine? Those are the kind of guys that come to my mind quickly. There are a couple others that are maybe fighting for things. I'm really curious about, like, say, Tyler Malley. are you back to your velocity of old or not? He's going to be fighting for that, so he's going to showcase his best stuff. But yeah, you can. It's really the fringe guys that are the most interesting, and are they showing something new? That's it.
Want to ask Ruvain? Want to start with Ruvain? A little bit of strategy questions and stuff, but what emphasis, Ruvain, do you give on pitchers who are throwing like 7+ innings of start? Might not have the best skill set, might not have the high strikeouts per inning, but they just throw a lot of innings.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily 7 innings. They really go 6 innings because very few pitchers. There's a very few pitchers who can actually go 7 innings anymore, or which managers allow pitchers to go 7 innings. I think it's more important to look at if they can go 5, 6, and if they have a history of it, and how good their bullpen is. So you have to be able to see how they're going to put together a win. So if they can pitch 6 innings and you know that the team that they're playing for has a pretty good bullpen, then if they build up a lead, maybe the bullpen will have a better chance of holding the lead and getting the chance to actually get a win. It's also a matter of what team they're on. I mean, same we mentioned about if you want to draft a player on a pitcher on a good team or on a bad team, if they're going 7 innings, it usually means they're pitching well, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're winning, because they can pitch 7 innings and be on the White Sox and be losing 2-0 or something like that. So I think it's a combination. You don't necessarily look for 7 innings per start, but if they're going at least 5, but 6 innings, 6+ innings, 6 2/3, that type of thing, you don't necessarily need that threshold, although you do need those innings eaters for your ratios in the long run to make sure that your ratios don't go bust when you do get those 2-star pitchers later in the season.
I mean, a head-to-head points league, I think that throwing pitchers who throw a lot of innings per start, very, very important. Like, I would almost tilt very much towards that. In a roto league, it's not as important. It is important because more innings, more of a chance to get a win, but definitely for head-to-head points, that is huge. Do you agree, Nick?
I really want to emphasize that is you actually, a lot of people were like, oh, I need volume in roto leagues, and they don't. I think people don't quite grasp that if you have volume with a whip that is below average, that is hurtful.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Damn.
You see Logan Webb last year with a 123 whip, and in a 12-team roto, that brought you down with all of his innings. That was tough, right? And it's, understanding innings about a guy that gets a lot of innings but also benefits the ratios. He is amplifying those ratios more than the guy who does that across fewer innings, right? And actually, it's funny, Ariel and I have been in Tout Wars head-to-head a few years. You're coming back to it this year. It's been CBS points, and guess what? I just go after innings guys. CBS points.
For sure.
And it's really fun to do that because I actually think it's interesting. I talk about my term Toby. Toby is a guy who's just like a boring 6-inning guy, right? Who doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. It's not really a great ratio start often, but it's fine. He's the last guy in your team, and I draft them in CB and that league a lot because, yeah, sure, I'll take the guy that is consistently going 6 innings with wins. I feel like a lot of those are generally undervalued. It's easier to find that kind of guy than a strikeout guy. Everyone knows that the guy has strikeouts. You just see that one column. It's like, oh, 7 Ks tonight. Sweet. He's awesome on my team, right? But the rare Mitchell Parker start with 4 Ks or something like that, but he went 6 innings or so, and he got a win on the Nationals. It's like, there are a lot of those random guys out there, especially in season, to find, and it's fun to do. But yeah, unfortunately, like Ruvain said, the 7+ inning start guy is just kind of gone these days. It's just like Wheeler and Webb. I mean, that's it.
I want to ask about the LA Dodgers.
Oh, no.
So, they're going to be a very good team. They're going to have a great hitting and offense, and so I would expect pitchers to have a better chance to win. However, they probably, because they have a gajillion starters, and they just signed Kershaw for, reinforcements, I guess, if you want to call it, and they've, Ohtani at some point will come back and pitch, yada, yada, yada. Maybe they have 12 starters who are viable. They're not going to let their pitchers throw a lot. Like, I have to imagine that it's like a 5-inning cap on everybody. Tyler Glass now, cap. Roki Sasaki, cap. Yamamoto's cap. Because remember, they're all playing for the postseason, and then later in the year, they're going to have a 6-man rotation. I wouldn't even be surprised if they had a 7-man rotation, to be honest with you.
I was actually just thinking that in my head.
Yeah. I mean, I would not be surprised at all if they said, you know what, you're going to pitch every Sunday, you're going to pitch every Monday, you're going to pitch every Tuesday, and that's, that kind of rotation. I'm telling you, it could happen. So there's conflicting things because they're probably going to get less innings from the cap, less innings from that. They aren't a good team, so they can get more wins. And maybe for guys like Glasnow who had injury issues, maybe it's better that they get less, that maybe they'll ultimately last longer in the season and get more innings total. So I'm just conflicted by all those opposing things. And my question to you is, how do you handle Dodgers pitchers? Is it now a plus for you to draft a Dodger? Do you understand the negativity, and does that register where you say, Roki Sasaki, but he's going to be capped at 5 innings, and I don't know. It's hard to get wins when you're just capped at 5 because there's lead changes late, blah, blah, blah. Well, what's your take on drafting Dodgers pitchers in general?
So, oh man, there's a lot of things to unpack there. First of all, you can't really have a team with starters going 5 innings every day because, yes, you want the starters to be healthy, but you also want the relievers to be healthy. And going 6-7 innings, this is the thing that really bothered me about the 2021 Cy Young, was I went to Corbin Burns with 167 innings and not Zach Wheeler with 214, and not realizing the impact that Wheeler had on the bullpen. Like, his value as a pitcher and him being that kind of pitcher who had a 270 ERA or whatever for so many innings, like, that saved the Phillies' pen throughout the year, right? It was such a bad bullpen then, too. So when you have all these guys, and they're all capped at, you're saying they're all capped at 5, I don't think that, I think that's going to hurt them, actually, if they do that. And the reason they have all these starters is because they don't really want to do that. They recognize that some are going to be skipped at times and that some are going to get hurt as it goes. And they just want to make it so that by the end of the year, they have enough who are still around, But you have to really remember that you don't have so many relievers waiting. Tanner Scott, Kirby Yates, Blake Trinan, Michael Kopech, Alex Vesia are like the main ones. And you got to hope that all 5 of those are healthy, at least like 2 by the end of it, right? When it comes to the Dodgers starters as a whole, though, how am I treating this? Well, yeah, the Roki thing is very interesting. Eric Samolsky made a really, really good point that the Dodgers could just say, we're going to give him extended spring training, and he's not going to be in that rotation in the beginning of the year. They can do that. He has 3 options. He could join in May. And guess what? You don't get to put him on an IL spot like Spencer Strider. You don't get to do it if you draft Shohei Ohtani, the pitcher, either. And with Tony Gonsolin and Dustin May both returning, I think they're going to be saying, great, we're going to let you guys ramp up into this, but we think that you have the healthy elbows now, so go off and do it. That's good volume without the risk, or really without the lower quality that you normally get from good volume, that allows Yamamoto, Snell, Glasnow to be treated with kid gloves, right? So I'm actually thinking to myself that Dustin May is the one to get on the Dodgers because he's going to start. He does have an arsenal that does speak to efficiency. He's a sinker guy with, I think, a better cutter than he's really got a chance to showcase. And I imagine that they'll just be like, yeah, you're healthy now. You're in the rotation. Just go and save these other guys as much as possible. So that's my thought process of this. And also with Tyler Glasnow, like, yeah, they'll cut him off at 5 innings at times, but you can't really do that all the time. And it's going to be 6 innings. And what I imagine is more likely are skipped starts with the 6-man rotation with someone else filling in for that single day. Less of capping at 5 each time. Because skip starts with someone else covering then helps out the bullpen. You give an extra 2 weeks of rest, which I think is actually more important. I'd rather that as a pitcher than go 5 every time. Just have a skip start, just like for my own health, because longer rest is what pitchers need to preserve their elbows. And with Glasnow, I really like because you get production of him every time you pitch. I have the most confidence of that crew, Yamamoto, Snell, Glasnow, Sasaki, Gonsolin, Dustin May, that when Glasnow starts, you get production out of it. You get quality, right? So that is really nice when I'm saying, okay, he's going to be limited in innings because of an IL stint. And that IL stint in a 12-teamer is off the waiver wire. So I get Glasnow plus the replacement. And the replacement of a starting pitcher this year is the highest quality I have ever seen entering the season. I cannot express this enough. The guys I have past 100, I'm just going, what? Like, this could easily be like the top 40 starter in Player Rater this year, you know? And I have to put him down there because it's like I'm playing with all the probabilities and everything and what's in the best interest. So I like Glasnow for that reason. Snell's just weird, and I think people forget just how weird and or much of a headache he is to roster for the first couple months. And all of a sudden, you just get saved by brilliance that is not going to be repeatable. And that's just kind of how I see like the Dodgers playing out. I'm cool with being a Dodgers pitcher in general. I think honestly, if they had a guy that was a workhorse type, they would just pitch him every 5 days, and they'd be fine with it. But because these guys have these little nuances, they're not, and they're preserving a little bit more.
But the Dodgers are different than every other team. If you hear, let's say, another team says they're going with a 6-man rotation, do you treat that? You can't treat that similarly to the way you treat Dodger pitchers. So what do you do in a situation where you hear, let's say, the Rays want to go with a 6-man rotation, or the Angels want to go with a 6-man rotation? How do you treat something like that?
Yeah, great question. So actually, I about 6-man rotations in general, I only trust the Dodgers truly, because the Dodgers, like, it makes more sense in the scope of their entire season and their plan or their mulligan, keep everyone healthy for the entire year, which didn't work out last year. What I normally say about 6-man rotations is that it's like Fellowship of the Ring. Starts off with a lot of guys with grand prospects and ends up with 2 guys barely surviving, right? So I hear about 6-man rotations all the time in the spring, and they end in like a week or 2 when someone's hurt. And that's it. Okay, never mind, 5-man. We're done. The thing about the Dodgers is they have so many guys that
they'll actually do it.
Finagle this. Yeah, they did it last year.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think the Angels were the other team that actually did it. What is it about Los Angeles? I don't know. I guess actually, you know, if you translate that into Spanish, it does mean 6-man. I should have realized that.
All right, so last strategy question, and I'll let Ruben go first here, but you need strikeouts and you need good ratios. You need both of them in Roto, okay? It's not an either or, but you might want to have a preference earlier on in drafts which to lock down. Should you get the Garrett Crochets and go that lane and get the strikeouts, or should you go the George Kirby lane and really lock down the whip and the ratios? Again, those are all great pitchers. They provide tons of the other, you know, the Kirby is going to get you strikeouts too. Crochet is going to get you whip, right? But, you know, it's one lane or the other. Which do you prefer to do? You know, which do you find is more plentiful later on so that you can backfill? You know, what's the right drafting strategy as you go through your draft, Nick?
So this is 2 questions, though. In season, it is harder to
find by the way,
strikeouts.
I originally said I threw it to Ruvain first. Sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
my
gosh.
fault.
I'm enjoying
no,
this.
Please,
this is fine. I don't
take it away.
My fault. Sorry, guys.
No, it's fine. No, I want to hear Nick's thing. I want to see if what my answer is going to be the same as Nick.
Okay.
Oh, man, no. I'm not going to change mine. Oh, gosh. All right, I'm going to say this quickly. It's easier to find ratios in season. A guy can have like a really good second half out of nowhere for ratio reasons. We see it all the time with random guys. And it's so much harder to find that with strikeouts. So if you are in a Roto league, it is generally better to favor strikeouts over ratios in your drafts at a high level. However, when it comes to drafting for me, my general rule is you want a guy with a really good ratio and volume floor with the upside of getting strikeouts, who has like a 22 to 24% strikeout rate and can also has elements that you think, wait, hold on a second, this could be more than this. It's the Alcantara method. It is the Wheeler method. It is the Kirby method. It is the George Kirby method, the Logan Gilbert method. This year, some of the ones that I see like that are like Justin Steele and Spencer Schwellenbach are good examples of that. And the second part of that was, where am I going in drafts? I'm not getting starters in the first 6-7 rounds of my 12-teamers. Hitters are just vastly more valuable, in my view. There's so many talented starters. The guys I have, I'm at 30s. I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm I'm going to have Aaron Nola and Luis Castillo outside my top 30 starting pitchers, which is nuts. I can't believe I'm saying that, but that's true because there are just so many good options. So, yeah, I don't feel like I should be paying for the gap between SP2 and SP30 versus hitter 2 and hitter, I guess, 30 or whatever it is. It's like hitter 60 by then.
Is that also because since you do know pitchers better, that you're just patting yourself on the hitters first because you have a better chance of picking out the diamonds in the rough later? Is that a
100%? I don't want to go after hitters in season because I don't want to spend the time. I already do this stuff on the pitchers. That'll help me. Definitely. It plays more to my strengths. That said, you don't need to do the work I do. You can just read the SP Roundup and do exactly what I do, guys.
Right. All right, Ruvain, your answer.
I disagree. I actually think you should get the ratios early on because if you get the ratios early on, you can make up the strikeouts later in the season by getting those 2-star pitchers and not having to worry about your ERA or WHIP blowing up. Also, you can pick up, if you don't want to throw the 2-star pitchers, you can get those high leverage relievers who have a lot of strikeouts, who have the high strikeout ratio. You can throw them in there. They can get an occasional save. They can get an occasional win, and they'll get you 3-4 strikeouts in an outing if they go 2 innings, or if they go over 1 inning, get 3 strikeouts, and they'll pitch 2-3 times a week. You may get the same total of strikeouts anyway for the course of the week with one of those relievers. So if you get that basis, let's say you get a George Kirby, and you have that base of ERA and WHIP, I think you're golden the rest of the year. You don't have to worry as much of blowing your ERA and WHIP later in the year.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point.
Yeah, I'm going to say that it's shifted over the years. I'd say that a bunch of years ago, maybe 5-7 years ago, the answer for me was definitely ratios because, you can just find a 2-star pitcher on the wire, throw him in, and get your strikeouts and volume, but you've padded your ratios before. I think it's harder to find, especially in 15-team or deeper. Maybe you can in 12-team and 10-team, but for deeper leagues, the 2-star pitchers and the wire pitchers aren't as good anymore. So I would say that I'm not trusting that. I need to get my strikeouts earlier on, and the padding, as Ruvain said, would be to use middle relievers as you go during the season. Middle relievers, to me, aren't somebody you should target in drafts. They're not as sticky year to year. Like, this guy's having had a good year last year. Doesn't mean the middle reliever is going to have a great year this year. But if you see in the first 2 weeks that this guy is looking good, you might get something for the rest of the year from him. So I'm of the strategy of lock down your strikeouts now and then pick up those middle relievers for jerk cheap on the waiver wire and throw them in to pad your ratios as needed, which is a totally different stance than it was a few years ago. It's not about answering the question, I think, for me. It's about seeing how the history has changed.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I mean, it's also really hard. 2-star pitchers are not as consistently going 2 starts. We've seen many times that teams will push guys back as well. There's more of a affinity for giving rest or to do spot starts randomly.
Very different today. You don't have that as you did before.
So that means even if you get that 2-star guy, you might not actually get that 2-star guy.
And the 2-star guys back then would throw 6 innings. Now the crappy guy on the waiver wire who throws 2-start, they're throwing 4 innings in each game. There's no win there.
But there's also no winner in this debate because you can win your league either way.
Yeah,
absolutely.
If you play correctly and you do it the right way, and you, let's say you hit on the right pitcher early on for the strikeouts and the ERA, or you hit on the pitcher later on, you can make either method work. It's just a matter of what you're more comfortable with.
We'll continue with the ATC undervalued starting pitchers in part 2 of this episode that will drop later this week. You won't want to miss that, and we'll see you all next time on Beat the Shift.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.